On November 12th, 2025, the defendant pled guilty to count 1, murder in the first degree, count 2, assault with intent to commit murder, count 3, misdemeanor cruelty to animals, and count 4, which is a sentencing enhancement for use of a deadly weapon in the commission of a felony. The court accepted the defendant's guilty pleas, ordered a pre-sentence investigation report, and set the matter over for sentencing. On December 8th, the court signed an order for 1925-22 psychological evaluation. On January 6th, the court received a copy of that psychological evaluation. On January 15th, the court received a victim impact statement from Crystal Thompson. On January 21st, the court received a copy of the pre-sentence investigation report. On January 23rd, the court received the defense's expert witness report from Dr. Jill Conity. And on January 27th, the court received the victim impact statement from Lucian. Ms. Beatty, has the state received all of these sentencing materials?
The state has, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis, has the defense received all these sentencing materials?
Judge, the defense has, and we have reviewed them together.
Right, I had a discussion with counsel in chambers. We have media in the courtroom, and so I wanted to discuss the media in the courtroom before we began. Looking at the position of the courtroom cameras, importantly, the cameras cannot capture any of the notes or personal effects of the attorney's laptop screen at counsel table. I think that was probably the most important thing that we needed to discuss. Otherwise, Ms. Beatty, is there any portion of the hearing that Crystal Thompson would like not to be recorded?
Just one moment. No, Your Honor. Ms. Thompson is fine with the entire thing being recorded.
Okay. So the court is going to permit audio and video recording of the entire proceeding, including Ms. Thompson, her statement, her person, when she makes her victim impact statement. I believe she's making a victim impact statement. And that's a slight deviation from what would normally be expected. All right. So the cameras can begin recording.
Judge, there's one more issue, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
with
sorry,
respect to the demonstrative exhibit. I spoke to Mr. Cornish. He is comfortable having it shown during the entire sentencing as opposed to having it turned over during my portion. Just to put it out there, I'll let the court make that decision.
All right, that's fine. Ms. Beatty, there's no objection from the defense to the state's exhibit being displayed, so that's up to you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
How you wish to display that exhibit. All right, is there anything else we need to cover procedurally before we begin?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
Not from the defense, Your Honor.
Okay. We're going to begin with victim impact statements. Then the state will make their sentencing argument, the defense will make their sentencing argument, and then allocution, and then the court will pronounce sentence. Ms. Beatty, are there any in-person victim impact statements?
There is one, Your Honor, and that is Crystal Thompson.
Ms. Thompson, come on up. Ms. Thompson, you're welcome to stand there at the podium if you're comfortable there.
Yeah.
So under our state constitution, you're a crime victim. You have a right under our state constitution to make a statement to the court today. I'm required to listen to everything that you have to say. Ma'am, when you're ready, go ahead and make your statement.
Okay. Onyx was my only daughter. She was one of the most vivacious and forthright individuals I have ever met. She was bold, fearless, and full of life. She loved her family deeply, especially her brothers. Even when she was very young, she would strike up conversations with total strangers and show genuine concern for everyone she met. She was extraordinarily kind and always willing to go out of her way to comfort others when they were hurting or scared. That was who Onyx was. She was a light in this world. Your Honor, the death of my daughter and the attempt to take the life of my son, Lucian, has permanently destroyed what family means. The defendant and I created these children together. I believed in our shared vision for our family. I had no doubt that the defendant was someone that I could trust to protect our kids. Even when we separated, like so many couples do, there was never a time that I thought he had it in him to harm our children, to kill our children. I always cherished the memories of the good times, the laughter in the house we made a home, the hugs, the I love yous. Even after we separated, I held on to those early memories because I believed in their fundamental goodness. Now, those memories are all tainted. All I can see in every memory is that I chose wrong. And I can't go back to save her. I cannot extract the excruciating pain Lucian is forced to endure, having lost both his sister and his father that terrible day. His future is plagued with this devastation, and it will impact every breath he takes for the rest of his life. My autistic son, Rain, and Onyx were very close. I can't put into words the difficulty I experienced when I had to tell him that his sister was dead. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to say. And Rain asks for her every day. He remembers that Onyx is gone, yet he seems to hope the information was a dream and that I'm going to say that she's fine. But no, the tragedy is real, and every day I see his heart break all over again. He doesn't understand entirely what death is, but he knows he will never see Onyx again. Your Honor, my children are everything to me. All of them. I am struggling to get through every day. Sometimes the reality hits me like a truck to my chest and I can't breathe. It's hard to get through my shifts at work, hard to sleep, hard to wake up, and hard to simply exist at times. Onyx deserved to grow up. She deserved to live the bold, compassionate life she was already living at such a young age. She deserved a future. My sons deserved their sister. I deserved my daughter. I respectfully ask the court to consider the full weight of what has been taken from us. Not just Onyx's life, but the devastation inflicted upon every single day that follows for the rest of us left behind.
Ms. Beatty, anything additional in terms of victim impact statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Morris will be reading Lucian Cornish's victim impact statement. He is not present today.
All right, Ms. Morris, when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to start by saying that the day my sister died was the day that I didn't feel a spark anymore. There isn't a day that passes that I don't think I could have done something different. Save my sister? Maybe. But it's going for a man who always told me to protect her. I wake up almost every day feeling like getting up is the hardest thing. I can't even go to school some days. Sometimes I have visions of my own father actually pulling the trigger. I get huge waves of dopamine, anxiety, and fear. Hits me like a truck at least once a day. When I struggle with these feelings, I can't help but think my dad's selfish. But something that I can't get out of my head is that someone would kill someone they love for their own selfish gain. That is the most cowardly decision I have ever seen. Because I still have a life, a future, and goals, why would the person who is supposed to show me what a man is do that to me? Signed, Lucian Cornish. And then he wrote a quote, "Suicide is not the end of things getting worse. It's the elimination of things possibly getting better."
All right, thank you, Ms. Morris. Ms. Beatty, when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. The victim in this case was given the name Hope Serene Ray Cornish at birth.
but her family and friends who are here today knew her as Onyx, and that's how I'll be referring to her during my argument. You'll notice that her loved ones who are here in the courtroom are wearing t-shirts with a number 3 on them. That was Onyx's favorite number. On the morning of December 10th, 2024, the defendant, Delbert Cornish, walked into the Sports Authority in Nampa and purchased himself a 9mm handgun. The defendant did that because he had a plan. His plan was to kill his teenage children and then himself. For months, the defendant thought about how he would murder Onyx, his stepdaughter that he had known since birth, and Lucian, his biological son. At one point, the defendant considered murdering Ian Cornish, his adult son. However, when Ian went to prison, the defendant gave up on that and kept his focus on Onyx and Lucian. After months of premeditation, on Monday, August 18th, the defendant woke up and decided, quote, "Today is the day," unquote. That morning, Lucian, age 15, left for school. Onyx was asleep in her bedroom, having worked a late night shift at the Wendy's over on 10th Avenue, right here in Caldwell. Shortly after Lucian left the home to go to school, the defendant picked up that handgun and walked toward his daughter's bedroom with that gun. Coincidentally, we know that Onyx happened to open the door as defendant walked down the hall. The defendant raised the gun and shot her through the top of her head, causing her to fall backward into her bedroom. Onyx died there, surrounded by her clothes, some personal items, and a stuffed teddy bear. We do not know exactly what was going through the defendant's mind when he murdered Onyx, a petite, feisty, vivacious teenager who was just starting her life out. But we do know what the defendant didn't feel. We know that the defendant did not feel remorse. And we know that because he sat there and listened to Onyx gasp for breath for 20 minutes, never once calling for medical help as he watched her die. We know that he did not feel regret because, as the defendant himself told the police later, he went into a rage. It wasn't enough that he had snuffed out Onyx's life. After shooting her point blank in the head, he turned that rage onto her beloved pet cat, Sammy. He shot Sammy dead a few feet from where Onyx lay. While Onyx lay there still bleeding, he covered her body in a pride flag. He took a hatchet to her bedroom door. He took a hatchet to her things. He smashed a mirror in her room to pieces, leaving shards of broken glass on the pride flag that he had draped across her body. And still thinking only about himself, he scrawled a twisted message in marker across Onyx's arm. Quote, "I love you, even if you didn't love me," unquote. After that, the defendant waited. He waited for hours for his young son Lucian to get home from school so that he could murder him too. After taking a hatchet to Onyx's bedroom and punching some holes in the wall, the defendant sat down and watched TV while Onyx's body lay down the hall behind him. Finally, Lucian did get home, and when he did, he immediately knew that something was very wrong. "I killed your sister," the defendant told him. Lucian, as he would later tell law enforcement, was in absolute shock and disbelief. He asked the defendant what he was talking about. That's when the defendant pulled out the gun and told Lucian, "Go look at your sister." Somehow, even in that moment, and even with that shock, Lucian bravely refused. Lucian begged the defendant to just let him leave the house. The defendant refused, so Lucian fought back. The defendant aimed the gun at Lucian, but Lucian, who was still fighting, was somehow able to get the defendant's gun from him. At some point, the defendant threatened to knock Lucian out and take the gun back. Eventually, Lucian managed to drop the gun and escape, calling 911. Later that day, when Lucian was interviewed by the police, he remembered something. He remembered that the defendant had once told them that if he had ever killed himself, he was going to take them with him. Lucian told the police that this conversation took place over dinner and that everyone had laughed. Lucian had asked the defendant, "What if I fight back?" The defendant had responded, "You better put up a good fight." After Lucian escaped that day, the defendant left the house and drove to Mountain Home. Still thinking only of himself, he decided he wanted to see an ex-girlfriend because, he said, she was his, quote, safe space. Once in Mountain Home, the defendant turned himself in and confessed. Meanwhile, when the police arrived at the residence, they found multiple suicide notes from the defendant, including a note scrawled on the wall. In those notes, the defendant blamed his brother, Stephen, whose home they were living in when the murder took place. But the defendant later told the police that he wrote those things about Stephen to tell him to, quote, go F himself, unquote. And Your Honor, I can tell the court that having talked to members of the family, the things that the defendant said about Stephen in those notes were not a reflection of reality. The defendant placing blame on Stephen is just another example of the defendant's twisted selfishness and resentment. I want to talk specifically about Lucian and the defendant's attempt to murder him. While the defendant's statements in the PSI are largely consistent with the evidence, there is one statement that was not. The defendant provided a statement to the PSI writer as sentencing approached about what happened with Lucian that day. On page 7 of the PSI, defendant said, quote, "My son came home from school and a struggle ensued after I informed him what I had done. Eventually, I allowed him to leave. I seen his eyes and could not follow through," end quote. That is not what the defendant told the police on the night of the murder. On the night of the murder, the defendant told the police that if his son had not taken the gun from him, he would have killed his son too. And that is on page number 42 of the pre-sentence investigation. The defendant did try to kill Lucian. Lucian remembers every searing detail. The defendant admitted it the same day, and he pleaded guilty to it. His desire to minimize it now is totally unsupported by all of the evidence in this case. I also want to talk about the effect this has had on Lucian. Lucian stated that he listens to music with one headphone off because he thinks he still hears his dad's voice, and sometimes he thinks he hears the sound of Sammy the cat's bell. When Lucian was interviewed by law enforcement, he described his fear that the defendant would come looking for him, as though Lucian still being alive was unfinished business for the defendant. In his own statement that the court heard, Lucian poignantly writes, "I can't get out of my head that someone would kill someone that they love for their own selfish gain." So the question is, what should the sentence be for this defendant who committed the ultimate atrocity? What should the sentence be for the murder of one child and the attempted murder of another, so senseless, cruel, cowardly, and callous? The answer to that question is clear: life without the possibility of parole. I am not going to belabor the factors set forth in Idaho Code 1925-21 because that statute deals with whether probation or prison is appropriate, and of course in this case, prison is the clear outcome. But there is one portion of that statute that I would like to direct the court's attention to, and that is the portion of the statute that discusses crimes that are so heinous that any lesser sentence would undermine the severity of the offense. And in this case, anything short of life without the possibility of parole would undermine the severity of the offense. I also want to address the two Hill factors. The first, of course, is protection of society. The defendant committed one of the worst crimes imaginable: the homicide of an 18-year-old and the attempted homicide of his biological son. It is difficult to imagine a more dangerous crime or a more heightened need to protect society. This was not a one-off. The defendant planned this murder for months. I also want to be clear about something, Your Honor. A mitigation report was filed in this case, but the defendant's suicide attempts with these facts are not mitigating. Undoubtedly, the defendant is depressed, and clearly he has been suicidal throughout his life. That is clear from the mental health evaluation, from the PSI and even from the mitigation report and even the evidence in this case as well. But it is not mitigating. The defendant's depression and desire to kill himself has long been intertwined with his homicidal desire to harm others. There are ample references in the materials before this court regarding an incident that took place the night that the defendant married his ex-wife Pauline many years ago. That night they got into an argument and he threatened Pauline with a gun. And then of course there is this incident, not a one-off, not an impulsive decision, but the culmination of months and months of planning and premeditation. It is also worth noting that the defendant, in a jail message a full month after he murdered Onyx, was discussing Onyx's mother, Crystal, with an individual that he was talking to. Quote, "According to her, I manipulated her and everyone to make people feel sorry for me," unquote, the defendant wrote. Quote, "I should have put a bullet in her," unquote. The defendant may have told the mitigation expert that he regrets what he did now, but his own words in the jail, sitting there with a month of forced sobriety, a month after this homicide and attempted homicide, that speaks volumes. According to the defendant himself, he should have put a bullet in yet another individual. Protection of society demands that we look at the defendant's conduct, past and present. Deterrence is the next two-hill factor, both general and specific. General deterrence, I won't belabor. Of course, I don't have to tell this court that murder requires general deterrence. The sentence in this case should send a message that there are some crimes that society will not tolerate, and this is one of them. But I do want to talk very specifically about specific deterrence, because this specific defendant is not just a threat to society as a whole. He is a specific threat to actual identified people, his family members. He previously threatened a family member with a gun. Now he murdered another family member and attempted to murder a third. And he sits in jail saying he should have put a bullet in a fourth family member. He is clearly a grave threat to Lucian, and his statement that he should have killed Crystal makes him a threat to her too. These are real people, and this court can protect them. The only way to ensure specific deterrence is to keep the defendant from ever having another opportunity to murder or hurt another one of his family members. Possibility of rehabilitation. The defendant does not appear to the state to be someone who could be rehabilitated. His thoughts of harming himself and others have been a consistent pattern throughout his whole life. The defendant, after a month of forced sobriety in the jail, mused that he should have shot someone else. That speaks volumes about his ability to be rehabilitated. Finally, punishment. There is no punishment harsh enough to be proportionate to what the defendant took when he murdered Onyx. The closest this court can come to any type of appropriate punishment is life without the possibility of parole. Delbert Cornish should wake up behind bars every day for the rest of his life. That still isn't enough, but it's the closest this court can get to true justice. Before I conclude my remarks, I would like to briefly address the no contact order and restitution. The state has submitted a no contact order that is modified to remove Stephen Anderson. Stephen Anderson is the defendant's brother, and he has asked our office to have some contact with his brother. Under these circumstances, he does not believe his brother can harm him, and he loves his brother and would like to speak to him. So we are not objecting to that and have submitted an amended no contact order. And Your Honor, we briefly talked in chambers about the possibility of adding Crystal Thompson to the no contact order, but given the circumstances, she does not feel that the defendant poses a threat to her while incarcerated, so she does not feel that she needs to be added to the no contact order at this time. So we would just stand by the amended no contact order that we have submitted to the court. As to restitution, we have submitted a restitution request for crime victims' compensation, but we would also ask the court to leave restitution open for another 180 days in an abundance of caution. This court did move more quickly than murder cases often do, and we want to ensure that we aren't missing anything. I would conclude, Your Honor, by saying that One of the most difficult things about homicide cases is that when a precious, bright, and irreplaceable life like Onyx's is snuffed out, there is no sentence that will bring her back. Lucian said that the day she died was the day he didn't feel a spark anymore. Crystal, her mother, described her as a light in the world. Crystal also described how sometimes the reality hits her like a truck and makes it hard to even breathe. Crystal described how Onyx's younger special needs brother misses Onyx but doesn't even understand she's gone, and Crystal has to tell him over and over again. Onyx's best friend Kaylee, who is in the courtroom today, will never get to stay up late talking to Onyx about life. And her friend Melina, who is also here today, says that she will miss Onyx's nobility most of all. There is nothing this court can do for Onyx now. And there's really nothing this court can do to ease the pain of the people who miss her. But this court can do something for Lucian. There was something that stood out to me in Lucian's statement. Lucian said that he still has a life and goals. And Lucian asked, why would the person who was supposed to show me what a man is do this to me? But the thing about Lucian is that even at 15, he is a man. I don't know what else to call someone who stared down the barrel of a gun and fought for his life, or who has found the courage to go on after this. I've been doing this job a long time now, and I've had the privilege of seeing human beings do incredible things against incredible odds. But what Lucian did that day was above and beyond courage. Lucian might be a young man, but he's one of the bravest men that I've ever had the privilege of meeting. Even with all that bravery, though, Lucian should not have to live the rest of his life wondering if the defendant will come after him someday. This court has the power to give Lucian some measure of justice. This court has the power to give Lucian certainty that he never has to worry about the defendant getting out, that for the rest of his life, he never has to worry that the defendant will come find him as unfinished business. In this case, Your Honor, the closest we can get to justice is life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ellis, when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Judge. I'd first like to say I'm sorry.
Mr. Ellis, if you can just direct your comments to the court, please.
Okay, yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry to the family. And it's very clear Onyx did nothing to deserve this. And I know there are answers the family is looking for. They're not going to come. There is no real reason why Mr. Cornish did this. But the reason why we got a mental health assessment, we got a mitigation report, is to figure out what makes Delbert tick. What happened? What's the context for which Mr. Cornish exists? He has no criminal history. It's a blank slate. We don't know what makes him tick. We had to go out and find it. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of what we learned, and I know it's in the PSI. I know the court has read everything, but I want to kind of go over it a little bit. Mr. Cornish, as the court knows, his parents were divorced by the time he was born. He was raised by his mother with half-siblings. Stephen, all of his brothers, they're half-siblings. They all share the same mother. At some point in his early life, stepfather came in the picture, and he talks a little bit about it in the PSI, it's in the mitigation report, about the physical abuse that took place in his family. Clearly his siblings were physically abused. One of his sisters was sexually abused. And I bring it up because when his sister, and this is important for his life, when his sister disclosed abuse when he was younger, I think he was maybe in his teens, he started kind of acting out. He went into he actually OD'd, and they took him into some mental health treatment to try to figure out what was going on. And at that point is when Delbert ran, and he had never seen mental health treatment again, started drinking, drugs, etc. He has never graduated college, he's never graduated high school, but he did receive a GED. The reports indicate that throughout most of his life he has maintained been gainfully employed. Prior to this incident, he does report about 2 weeks before, maybe 3 weeks before he did lose his job. That is a culmination of some of the events that we believe led to this. There is also, it was kind of talked about by the state, He is the biological father of Lucian, but he is not the biological father of the other children. But it is important to know that my understanding is that other children, he was on their birth certificate, he treated them like his own, including Ian, who is now incarcerated. But these, for lack of a better word, were his children, and he viewed him as such. It's very clear, and you heard a little bit about it, but throughout Delbert's life, he has been an alcoholic. He has consumed copious amounts of drugs. There's some LSD, mushrooms, all sorts of stuff. And he's very open about his substance abuse. The biggest issue is his alcohol. He's been drinking consistently. I think the first time he started drinking alcohol was maybe around 14, somewhere in there, 10 to 14 range. And I think that coincides with, he indicated to our expert that he began having suicidal thoughts at the age of 10. I know a lot of 10-year-olds. I don't know a lot of 10-year-olds who have suicidal ideations at that age. But to Delbert, this was normal. This is how he grew up. He reports he has thought about killing himself for 40 years. This is not an excuse, but the court needs to understand what makes Delbert tick. This wasn't anything that Onyx did. There's nothing she did, right? It could have been anyone. So this is not something that she deserved it. Yes, they had a bad relationship, but it wasn't to this nature, to this extent. But what has tormented Mr. Cornish is his depression, his anxiety. At really no point in life, except for when he was a small child, he's had no counseling. The first time he's ever been on mental health meds was when he arrived in the Canyon County Jail. He is taking Zoloft. He's clear-headed. He's sober. I understand in September he sent some chirp messages that included that threat. But I report to this court that Delbert is clear-thinking. He's much more clear-thinking than he was. He's come out of that fog. He will tell you, and he told our investigator, our expert, is that he is his own worst critic. And even Stephen writes in the PSI that he thought he was a horrible person. But no one else thought that. He thought he was a horrible dad. And I get he's responsible for killing his daughter. We know that's horrible. But Stephen had the mindset that Delbert doesn't believe in himself. This was something that he dealt with his entire life. Delbert thought he was nobody. He couldn't succeed. He was never good enough. No one really looked at Delbert that way, but that's how he viewed himself. He was his own worst critic. He has never really been able to maintain a solid relationship. The relationship with Ms. Thompson was rough. He was married for about a month. In the 90s, that was rough, and he's kind of been going back and forth. And there was a quote that our mitigation expert put in the report. It's on page 5. And I'm going to quote it because it said much better than I could ever say it. And it says, a significantly conflicted attachment style characterized by both high avoidance and high anxiety. This combination suggests considerable difficulty with relationship engagement, showing both strong tendencies to maintain emotional distance while simultaneously experiencing intense anxiety about relationship. His attachment style may have led him to have challenges in support-seeking behavior, as well as his ability to emotionally regulate. I think that hits it on the head. He was never able to maintain relationships. This is how Delbert has existed. This is his normal. This is what he knows. You throw all of that mental health out there, and then you start adding alcohol and drugs. And you get this cacophony of emotions and violence. We know that, based on the report, he's been experimenting with drugs throughout his life. Mostly recently, it's been marijuana and alcohol. That has kind of been the two that he's been going back and forth. That is his coping mechanism. That's how it's been for a long time. And in fact, I gather the last day he was drunk at the time this happened, so that would have been the last day he consumed alcohol. He has been sober since then. So I know the judges, you've read everything. It's all there. What I really want to get about is a couple things that were mentioned and kind of what makes Mr. Cornish tick. There are zero excuses for what happened. And I want to make that clear. Not only am I making that clear, so is Mr. Cornish. And I know that, and I respect why the state said it, but they had said he was minimizing what was said based on what was said in August versus now. Well, he admits he had consumed a half a gallon of whiskey. So when he was confronted or when he called the cops, because what had happened is he went to his ex-girlfriend's house After he killed Onyx, he waited, he consumed alcohol. That rage after that killing is what is the result, and I'm sure the court's seen the pictures of the hatchet in the door, the things being broken. And he drank and drank and drank until Lucian came home. And there's what he said in September or August is, well, if I was going to kill Lucian, I would have, but you didn't take the gun away. Probably. Lucian was able to retrieve the magazine from the gun and it was not operable. However, what Delbert will tell you is after this all happened and Lucian came home and I wanted to kill him, after I saw his face, I couldn't do it. I didn't chase him. Delbert never chased him out of the house. Delbert just let it go. And I think it's important to say, yes, there were words that were exchanged. He did point the gun. I think there was even an allegation a gun might have been fired at the floorboard of the home. But he realized in that moment what had happened. The light had turned on, and Delbert fled. He went to his girlfriend's house, and she immediately, based on his instructions, called 911. It was immediate. And he waited, surrendered, and he gave a full confession at the time he was arrested and back in an interview room. I know it's hard to understand this, Judge, but I do submit to you that Delbert did love his children, and that includes Onyx. It is a weird dichotomy, and I cannot put myself in Delbert's position to fully understand what made him tick. It is a weird mindset, and the state kind of talked about it, but I think he was afraid. His mindset, it didn't make sense, was if I'm not here to take care of the children, no one else is. It's a demented mindset, but that was his mindset, is I'm doing this in some way to protect the children. And obviously, we don't solve problems that way, we know that, but that is what was going on with him at that point. Delbert is incredibly remorseful. And the reason why I know he's remorseful, two things. One, he pled guilty the second he could. And two, one of the PSI writers asked him what the appropriate sentence would be. And he gave a response. His response first was death. That's the appropriate sentence. That, to me, sounds like someone who's remorseful and not minimizing. His next response was life. He knows that he deserves to be punished for this. There is no excuses, and he is remorseful. And in fact, you only saw a snippet of his chirp messages. There's hundreds where he does express remorse and sadness about what happened. It doesn't take back the life of Onyx. It doesn't take back the trauma that Lucian has suffered, and certainly the cat that was shot. But I don't want the court to go into the sentencing thinking that he is not human and he doesn't have emotion, because he does. And he knows he screwed up. He's going to have to take a stiff sentence. And this is the hardest part. This case sucks for everyone involved. The hardest part, what the state is saying, is what is an appropriate sentence? We look at past cases, what judges typically do. This case is a little different. It's not a gang shooting. It's not typically what we see here. It was an innocent individual who was killed. I don't disagree with any of that. The question is, how do we go about Delbert? Are we going to look at rehabilitation? Is it just about retribution? And my thought is this. I understand fully why the state is asking for fixed life. This could have been a death penalty case. I get it. He's right now 51 years old. If he went away for 25 years, he's not eligible until he's 76. If he went away for 30 years, he's not eligible for parole till he's 81. Mr. Cornish is not in good health. Effectively, likely any sentence this court is going to give him might effectively be life, whether it's a fixed life or not, because of where he's at. And of course, the parole commission may not let him out. My request today is that the court impose 25 years fixed, followed by life indeterminate. That would give Delbert enough time to serve his time, get treatment, and have the potential of being paroled for a couple years at the end of his life. I know the prospects of a 76-year-old or an 81-year-old getting out of prison and trying to start a life is slim to none. But sometimes that light at the end of the tunnel does a number for the defendant when they're in custody. Being incarcerated with no light It's a tough pill to swallow. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, and the court knows, but sometimes I think it's important to show, I worry about the guys who go with a fixed life, that he's going to have nothing to worry about and it's going to be a problem in jail or in prison. He has not been a problem. I don't think he will be. The conduct assessments were flawless. He has had no issues at all. But I want to give him something to potentially look forward to. Some reason why he's going to conduct all the treatment he needs. Some reason to do all the mental health treatment. Some reason to actually contribute while he's in there and give back. So I'm asking the court for 25 years plus life. A couple other things I wanted to mention. So with respect to the restitution, I've seen the request, I've not seen an affidavit, no objection to leaving it open for 360, totally fine, no problem. NCO, with respect to Lucian, we don't want it in place, but there's nothing we can do about it. I understand it's going to stay in place. With respect to Ian, now Ian is the son who is currently serving a prison sentence. Ian's sentence satisfaction is 2039. I don't know if he'll be paroled prior to that. Our request is that he can have limited contact upon Ian's release while Delbert is in custody. I don't think IDOC would allow inmate-to-inmate communication. I'm not positive. But following Ian's release from custody, if we could have written or telephone communication. The other issue is with Lucian. He's not here, and Delbert will have a chance to talk. But one exception is perhaps if Delbert can issue an apology letter, either through Ms. Thompson or through Stephen Anderson. But I'll leave that where it is. So with respect to, I know the court didn't mention it, but there is a potential $5,000 civil penalty I'm sure the court has seen. I don't really have an opinion on that, how the court wants to handle it. If the court is inclined to issue restitution and some civil penalty, I would ask the court to limit his fines, fees, and public defender reimbursement, so he has time to pay those back. And lastly, Judge, I want you to take into consideration his entire life, not just the conduct that the past 3-4 months, but there is something that makes Delbert tick. He is human, and I submit to this court that he knows what he did was wrong, and he takes full responsibility, and he will submit to the court to whatever sentence it gives him. And I'm terribly sorry to the family, so thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. The defendant has a right to make a statement to the court prior to sentencing.
It's hard. First thing I'd like to apologize to the LGBT community about the slur that I wrote. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I supported and honored my daughter's lifestyle choices with an open heart. I wish my son was here because I really wanted to apologize to him. And Mr. Ellis is right. Once I saw his eyes, I couldn't do it. So if somebody could tell him that I'm really sorry. And I hope he wants to talk to me one day. As far as the life I took, their mother did a really good job describing who she was. She was beautiful, she was brilliant, and authentically themselves all of the time. And I could never muster enough words to convey the amount of regret, anguish, and remorse I have for what I've done to each and every one of us, and including those that never got a chance to meet them. That's a debt I could never pay back in this lifetime or the next.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis, any reason why judgment cannot be pronounced?
No reason, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Morse, if I could, I can't see Ms. Thompson. Can you just? Ms. Thompson. From one parent to another, I cannot imagine your loss. It is immeasurable. It is beyond endurance. You love your children. What parents do for their children is they do the impossible. It seems impossible to go forward, to deal with pain, grief, the loss that you have to. You will do that for your children. It's what parents do. It's what parents should do. I'm sorry Lucian's not here today. I was expecting to be able to address him. I reviewed the PSI prior to his victim impact statement. The state's comments and Lucian's own comments cover a lot of what I was going to say to him. It is conventional wisdom that young men need a strong father figure in their lives. If they don't have that, it makes it more difficult to grow and mature into an adult. Lucian was dealt the opposite hand with his father. He will have to be the exception, and it is possible. The exception is that when a young man does not have a proper father figure, that he will understand that, and he will commit himself to becoming a good man, despite the hand he was dealt. It's clear to me, I agree with Ms. Beatty, that Lucian is an exceptional young man. I was going to make the same comment. He's already endured more than practically every grown man. I have confidence in him. He's going to make it. In preparation for today's sentencing, I toured the Idaho State maximum security prison yesterday. I spent the morning there by myself. I visited every square foot of that facility because I knew that the court was going to sentence this defendant to a lengthy prison sentence. I think it's appropriate for the court to see where they're sending people. The cell that I visited was a few square feet. It was entirely concrete and steel. It was a thick metal sliding door. A small metal door in the middle. Every inmate that I saw moving from one place to the other was handcuffed behind their back and had 2 guards escorting them. When they were returned to their cells, the doors closed. They have to back up to the cell and they're unhandcuffed through that small door. When the inmates that I saw left their cells, they were placed in a central room in a cage by themselves. There's practically no access to outdoors. No small comforts. A totally solitary existence. Completely surrounded by hard, impersonal materials. It was unpleasant to be there for a few hours. I just mention that because I have no illusions about where this defendant will be spending his time. And there is no comfort. He will be alone with his thoughts. In fashioning a sentence, the court is required to consider community safety first, of course. Second, rehabilitation, which there's no possibility of that in this case. Third, deterrence, which I don't view as being a factor because this is an act of pure evil. Deterrence is something the court engages in to send a message, to make people think before they commit crimes. And the way that I look at the facts of this case and this defendant, that type of message, that type of logic will not penetrate the mind and the thinking of someone who would engage in this evil act. Fourth factor is punishment. There are several cases that come in front of this court where punishment is the least important factor, where the court is attempting to intervene in someone's life to help them improve, to have a better life. And the court really is not seeking to punish. This case is the unfortunate, very rare exception where the court's sentence is determined almost entirely by punishment. Children do not choose to be born. They are brought into this world by their parents. When you bring a child into this world, it is your responsibility to protect them, to provide for them. This defendant was unhappy with what his life turned out to be. He has what I perceive to be a sense of entitlement. He thinks for some strange reason, that the world owes him. And he hadn't received from the world what he expected to just passively receive. And that angered him. Instead of handling that on his own and dealing with his own disappointment, he decided to commit the most evil act that you could think of. Murder a beautiful, young, innocent person. And attempt to murder his own son. The defendant is represented by a very skilled and experienced attorney who articulated every possible factor that could be in the defendant's favor. And all of it doesn't add up to much. When you compare the harm caused by his criminal actions compared to any reason to show mercy, the court is unpersuaded. The defendant will stand while the court pronounces sentence. On count 1, murder in the first degree, the court sentences the defendant to life in prison. That sentence will be fixed and it will be imposed. The defendant will die in prison. The court imposes court costs and lifetime no contact order with his son Lucy. The court will reserve restitution for 360 days. On count 2, assault with intent to commit murder, the court imposes 29 years in prison, fixed, consecutive to count 1. On count 3, cruelty to animals, the court imposes the maximum sentence, 6 months in jail, consecutive to counts 1 and 2. The court will order the defendant to submit a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression within 10 days. The defendant has a right to appeal the court's sentence. That appeal must be filed within 42 days. The defendant has a right to file a Rule 35 motion. That must be filed within 120 days. The defendant has post-conviction rights. Those expire 1 year after the expiration date of his direct appeal rights. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the Canyon County Sheriff to be delivered to the Idaho Department of Corrections. He will remain there until he passes this earth. If there is a God, perhaps God will have mercy on his soul. The state of Idaho does not. The court is in recess.
Please rise.